Welcome to the Low Post Podcast, live from Los Angeles, California, my last day on the beautiful West Coast. It's always so nice here. Bobby Marks, the season is approaching. How are you, sir?
I'm good, Zach. Doing great. Working on a little bit of a training camp primer that will come out on October 2nd, but all is good.
Primer.
Who's
going to be on what team? There was a lot of buzz about Dame related, tangential Dame industrial complex yesterday, Thursday. It's Friday morning, 9:00 here on the West Coast. Not sure how accurate the buzz was or how much is actually going on. The buzz was not really directly Miami related. We all know that's where Dame wants to go. Woj, I believe, is going to have an update of sorts on NBA Today in a few hours. I do not know what's going to be in that update, but some stuff is like mildly afoot. Do we have any idea what is mildly afoot?
Well, I just think it's listen, we're 10 days away from training camp. I mean, that's the reality of it here, where Damian Lillard is going to report to Portland for training camp, and there's going to be media day on Monday. I think that's the first or second. Some teams start a little bit earlier, and I think if you're Portland, you're looking at the big picture. Like, we need some clarity. I think if you're Lillard, you want some closure, and I think that's why we're hearing a lot more rumors and buzz. I mean, Thursday there was enough buzz Thursday where for the first time in the month of September, I was out last night. I had my backpack with me, and my backpack has stayed home with my computer. So I think the reality is that there's both. Everyone wants some closure now. It's a matter of Portland figuring out what's the best deal for them here.
I almost canceled my dinner. I had a 7:15 dinner in Los Angeles last night. I was very excited to meet this person for dinner, have a nice meal. I almost canceled it and ended up feeling good about the fact that nothing was going to happen. I agree with you. I just think this is time pressure. I still would bet on Miami just because, I mean, inertia tends to win. Other teams are definitely thinking through the idea of how worried are we actually that he's going to come here and say, well, I didn't want to be here. Can you trade me to that other place? I think with the contract teams, just that's a tough conversation for some of these other teams that are just, I don't even know how serious the interest is in some of these places that have been reported as like wild card teams or whatever. That's definitely a conversation. I said on TV the other day, one GM of a team that I don't think has any real interest in Damian Lillard, has some assets to do it if they wanted to. I don't see it. Said the phrase way station. Are we going to be used as a way station? I don't know how to parse that. Toronto has been mentioned, rumored as a wild card team. That's why I had Kevin Pelton discuss, is there a Toronto deal that makes sense? Don't think Scotty Barnes would be involved. I said that the other day. I think you could make one be interesting. Good players going to go out. I think be interesting. Any other teams that we probably all spent yesterday making calls? Any other teams that you're newly on alert for?
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned Toronto. Toronto is intriguing here. Kevin Pelton and I and Tim Bontemps, I think a week ago, did this fake trade article, and that was one of the teams that was mentioned. And I just thought there was so much risk there because, let's say, hypothetically, OG's in the deal and whatever draft picks, and I think there's just risk from both sides. Where a year from now, Damian Lillard, a year older with 3 years, $150 million. Who knows what happens with Pascal Siakam? Looks and says, I want out again. And then Toronto's basically left with, Scotty Barnes and cap space to build around. I think it's interesting. We have Friday, which is we're talking today, is the first day that Giannis is extension eligible. We have an article up on ESPN.com why he's likely not going to sign it and kind of the ramifications now and long term here. I think if you're Milwaukee, I think you're interested in maybe just kind of dipping your toe in to see what the availability of Damian Lillard is, and certainly would cost you Drew Holiday. What's the value of Holiday around the league? A player that's on an expiring, he's got a player option for next year, expiring, extension eligible, and on February 22nd. Can you flip him if you're Portland for something more stuff or something else? Because I don't see how Holiday fits, certainly with the Trailblazers here. But yeah, I mean, those are some of those non-Miami teams that, certainly if you've kind of caught wind of a little bit.
The other teams that have been mentioned, across time now since July, your San Antonio's, Utah's, Brooklyn's, New York's, I still just continue to hear no. No, not like a hard, strong no, but just like doesn't seem like likely for us. New Orleans. You mentioned Milwaukee. I can't see it. I can't. I mean, I get why they would look into it for sure. I mean, the pressure that is on them now is extraordinary. They have Drew Holiday, and they have, I believe, 1 first-round pick they can trade. And if you unprotect it, given the uncertainty, to be honest, that's a valuable asset. It's a very valuable asset. I just don't know that Drew Holiday on an expiring deal is fetching the Blazers through a third team the kind of bonanza that they're going to want, the kind of bonanza that has to trump the, whatever you think of Miami's offer. There's stuff in it, like a pile of stuff. It may not be the most attractive pile you've ever seen, but it's a pile. And Drew Holiday's he's a very good player. I love Drew Holiday. I had him on my All-NBA team last year. I thought he was outstanding, maybe the best year of his career. Struggled in the playoffs again. And you're just in a position, if you get him, where you either lose him for nothing or you pay him a lot of money as he enters his mid-30s. And I just don't know that the bushel is going to be there. Toronto is interesting just because they have these pieces, right? They've got Siakam and Anunoby. They don't control all their picks because of the one they owe San Antonio, but you can finagle around that if you want. And obviously, if you're trading for Damian Lillard, no matter what team you are, you have to be good enough, either immediately or pretty soon, like within a trade deadline cycle, to make a real run at it. And if one of your good players, and you mentioned Anunoby, that's just common sense to me. I'm not reporting that. That just seems like the most commonsensical one. Maybe Siakam because I don't know. You're hurting your present day team to bring in Damian Lillard. The only thing I'm curious about, the more I thought about it, was you do have, if you're a team like Toronto in that case, you do have Damian Lillard under contract for a substantial amount of time. I do wonder if you have a discussion about, okay, yeah, maybe we don't have the ideal team right away. Maybe we don't have the ideal team after the trade deadline. Maybe we don't even have the ideal team after one free agency cycle, at least right away. What if Giannis leaves Milwaukee? What if Philly implodes? What if the Donovan Mitchell thing becomes more uncertain for Cleveland? If we get Dame, Miami doesn't get him. What if Jimmy Butler gets a little older? Like, you can almost talk yourself into wagering against the rest of the East. Like, who else are we scared of in the next 3 years? Yeah, we're imperfect. We have work to do. We have pieces to still get. I just think that's an interesting discussion. I still think it's just going to be Miami because of inertia. But that's not even reporting. To be clear, I don't know what, with any certainty, what exactly is going on. If you just asked me, Zach, you have to bet actual money, which I don't do, on which team gets Dame, I'm just still going to bet Miami because he's made it so clear that's where he wants to go. I don't. Do you disagree or no?
No, I agree with I agree with Sam. I mean, I think Miami. I mean, we basically know what the parameters of what type of deal could be just based on what they have, with whether it be Hero and the two big numbers, Robinson or Kyle, to make the money work, and then certainly the young players, and then the draft picks. I think I think going back to Toronto is just interesting just because, certainly Masai is a risk taker, but man, he holds his cards to his vest. I mean, we went through last year's trade deadline when we thought that whole team could have been turned over, whether it be Van Vliet going into the it was going to be a free agent, and OG and Pascal. Now you're looking at the same situation with two players with Pascal and OG who are extension eligible. OG, I don't think is going to sign one because it's low. And if you're Toronto again, it's like, do we make a high risk move at the cost of OG? And if Pascal leaves, then do we flip Lillard again, but a year older and now 3 years left on his contract? Like, that's kind of like, do we see like there's kind of a little bit of a window, where the Eastern Conference is here, but I think for me, it does go back to where Miami is. And I think it's a matter of, getting a third team involved. If the hero component does not appeal to Portland.
Could be 3, could be 4 teams. Wouldn't surprise me if it turned into a 4-team trade.
Rarely do these big ones, or just two, they're rarely clean, right? It's rarely just a two, like 2 teams, 6 players, multiple draft picks. You're getting, and here's the other thing too, Zach, why maybe a little bit of a sense of urgency is it's a lot easier doing these deals. We saw it last year with Donovan Mitchell trade with Utah in Cleveland. It's a lot easier doing these deals up to October 23rd because we're dealing with 21 players on the roster. We've got expanded rosters right now where you could do a 4-for-1 deal, and basically you're just waiving guys on Exhibit 10 contracts. That's really it. When we get into the season, October 24th, pulling off a Miami deal or any of these deals, a 5-for-2 type deal, becomes a lot more challenging because now we're waiving guys. Now we're adding 3 or 4 teams to try to get rid of contracts.
And some of those teams, I mentioned like a whole litany of teams that I still think are kind of lean no. It takes just a couple changes of heart to make lean yes. You just never know. But I do think it seems like there's some acceleration towards something in the next couple. It could be a couple weeks, could be training camp, could be in camp. It doesn't have to be this weekend. Who the hell knows? Let's talk about the Indiana Pacers, a team I'm very excited to watch this season that will rank high in the league pass rankings, with Tyrese Halliburton and a lot of speed and a lot of dunking and some interesting pieces. Won 35 games, I think, last year. Over unders 38.5 this year. So I think this could be a play-in team for sure. And if things go right, maybe they get out of the play-in. Maybe I think there's a path for them to make the playoffs this year. There was some news this week via The Athletic that Buddy Hield, who was a valuable member of last year's team and has been one of the best high-volume three-point shooters in the history of the NBA, after extension talks have apparently fizzled, that the Pacers, according to The Athletic, are working with Buddy Hield on finding a trade. So I ask you, Bobby Marks, trades. Everyone likes talking about trades. Are there any Buddy Hield trades that you like?
Yeah, I actually brought out the whiteboard and have a bunch of Buddy Hield trades. So first of all, $19.3 million this year. He's got some likely bonuses in here based on 3-point shooting that he reached last year. I think it's interesting. The Athletic reported that extension talks fizzled because Hield wasn't at a comfort level. I think if you're Indiana, and I'm just talking out loud from a front office perspective, not that they offered this, I think they have $7.5 million in cap space. He was renegotiation eligible. I think if you're Indiana, you're looking to maybe add that money there and then drop his number down, similar to what Utah did with Jordan Clarkson, right? Boost it up to like 25 and then drop it all the way down to like $15-16 million. And that would have been
Indiana did with Miles Turner.
Yeah. That would have been a tremendous deal for, for them. Hield's 30 years old here. So here's one that I like. I'm looking at Oklahoma City.
They're not on my list. Ooh.
Shooters. Put some shooters around Shea. And basically, certainly the Bertans contract is probably going to be the one, right? Just to get that, certainly there's with the new trade rules, there's some flexibility, but I'm looking at kind of Bertans and a combination of like Isaiah Joe in like 3 seconds. I don't know if that does it for Indiana.
Boomer sooner. Boomer
What's
sooner.
what's that? Yeah.
Boomer sooner. Oklahoma Sooners.
Isaiah Joe, nice. Here's another shooter. He's got a team option for next year, non-guaranteed. Bertans partial next year. Oklahoma, so you can do whatever you want with the draft picks. They've got so many first and seconds here. So that's kind of just from a philosophy standpoint, as far as putting shooters around Shea in Oklahoma City.
I just think Isaiah Joe's good.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna say no to that from Oklahoma City's perspective, but they're not on my list. Give me another one. Let's do rapid fire. If you have another one, I don't know.
We've heard Milwaukee. I just have a hard time with Milwaukee just getting to the number. So you're at 19-3. You got to get to like 17 and change because it's 110%. They're a second apron team. Now you're starting with like it's too rich for a combination of Grayson Allen or Pat Connaughton and then adding Bobby Portis. That is rich, man.
So Milwaukee was the first team I thought of.
Yep.
Just the idea of another just absolute knockdown, stone cold assassin around Giannis appeals to me.
Yep.
Allen and Connaughton together get you there, right?
The two of them combined? Do. Yeah, definitely.
And so Grayson Allen's on an expiring deal. He's good. Playoffs are never kind to him, but the playoffs won't be kind to Buddy Hield defensively. Buddy Hield's never played in the playoffs, by the way.
I know.
Connaughton, I've always liked Pat Connaughton. Had a disappointing season last year, fell to the fringes of the rotation when it really mattered. It's still two rotation guys for one who's probably the worst defender among the three of them, but also the best shooter. Grayson Allen's expiring deal is semi-valuable. Pat Connaughton's on a 3-year, $27 million deal. That's not a bad contract. I just don't know if it's enough of an upgrade. And if I'm worried about his defense in the playoffs more than I am about Grayson Allen's, I don't know if I can do it. You certainly can't put Portis is just too good.
Yeah.
To put in a Buddy Hield deal.
Yep.
But they were the first team I thought of. That's one I take a vote on, but I don't know. Any other ones?
Yeah, I mean, I looked at Memphis potentially here.
I like it.
Just where they are with certainly I think you would probably looking at a Kennard swap for Hield and whatever else can go with it. Kennard's got a team option for next year. I think certainly you could go Smart and with Morant out, Smart, Hield, Bane as your three guys, at least in the short term, if you had to. I looked at Dallas potentially. I don't know if
they were the second team I thought of. Tim Hardaway's got 2 years left on his deal. Buddy's got 1. So if I'm Dallas, I got to pay something to get off a year of money and get a guy who's a better shooter. He's less dynamic with the ball, but a better shooter. I guess I got to pay a second. Do I have to pay 2 seconds? I don't know.
That's all they have. They've got 2 seconds in the kitty here. If you're looking at players, I mean, is Hardaway and Josh Green too much for Buddy Hield?
Yeah, too much. I can't put Josh Green in. It's just got to be a straight up with a couple of seconds next to it. And I don't know that Indiana wants that extra year of Tim Hardaway's money.
Yeah.
But that was one that was on my list. Can I give you a couple ones?
Yeah, sure.
I thought about Detroit. I like the idea of shooters on a team that doesn't have a ton of it other than Bogdanovic, who might be a trade chip. I thought, a team that could stand to trade big for small because they have so many centers. So I thought Bagley and Killian Hayes.
Mm-hmm.
But Indiana's just got so many bigs. I mean, we're going to talk about all their bigs. They have Miles Turner, Daniel Tice, Isaiah Jackson, Jalen Smith. I think they're going to be interested in playing Nwora some at the 4. There's a lot of Jordan Nwora buzz. Toppin is going to be their starter. The Walker kid they just drafted. It's just I don't think that they're hungry.
Naismith played a little 4 for them too. Like they've got small.
Yeah, he might be the odd man out in their rotation, and I am the president and czar of Aaron Nesmith Island and have been for a long time. I like Aaron Nesmith. I thought about I mean, the Lakers would be the funniest one because it's one of the roads not taken, but they just don't have. No one is tradable right now, and I
Deja
just don't
vu
see.
to when he was in Sacramento, Kyle Kuzma, right?
Yeah. I thought about both the Spurs and the Jazz just as like, I just like the idea of giving young players shooting, like just make it easier for some of our young guys. But the Spurs have McDermott. I don't sense a lot of Jazz interest, so there no. My wild ones are Charlotte. Again, a team that could everyone could use shooting, a little more clarity in the backcourt, a good bench. I think Buddy Hield would still come off the bench if Rozier and LaMelo are there, and I can throw in Cody Martin, who kind of fell to the fringes last year, and is a player that's under contract for multiple years at a good number. And maybe Indiana is like, I want a player who's under contract. I want to trade an expiring for someone who can help my team. A wing, a legit okay wing is actually kind of what they need off the bench. And then maybe I get a shot at like Book Knight or Kai Jones or both of them to make the money work. I mean, Kai Jones has had a very active social media summer. That's one I thought of. I keep waiting. Orlando, Gary Harris, and like Chuma Okeke and a couple of seconds. Just say, hey, you know what? Let's get a knockdown shooter. Let's turn Gary Harris, who's a better defender by a long shot. And I thought after injuries, started to look like Gary Harris a little bit last year. So maybe that's a no-go. And then I'm out of ideas.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get it. I think Orlando would be almost more like, let's see where we are come mid-December. And I don't know, but I don't think Buddy Hield will be still on the board. Who knows? Maybe that's something that's in there. They've got, kind of the litany, I guess, of guards, but not really a shooter, right? I mean, you look at Fultz, Suggs, Anthony Black, Gary Harris, Caleb Houston. That's like
Jett Howard.
Yeah, Jett Howard. So that would certainly make sense. And as you said, they've got that big expiring contract for Gary Harris.
Big year for Jalen Suggs. It's a big year, given who they drafted and how high they drafted him. It's a big year for Jalen Suggs. I'm not giving up on Jalen Suggs, but he's got to start making more shots. I like his spirit as a player. I like his mentality. I just have to see some more shots go in. Let's talk about the Pacers as a basketball team and not just a factory for trades. Because I like this team. I think they're going to be a delight to watch. And Tyrese Halliburton has stamped himself as an all-star level player and someone who's just, everybody's going to want to play with this guy. Team USA kind of reaffirmed what he's going to be in the NBA. It's funny, I was talking about LaMelo a couple of days ago with somebody, and like this person said, could you imagine like even a year and a half ago if you had asked LaMelo versus, like, I remember on NBA Today we were talking about LaMelo or John Morant 2 seasons ago. LaMelo or Trae Young was like a popular one. Now it's like, if you ask 30 GMs LaMelo or Tyrese Halliburton, I think it's like 2010 Halliburton.
Yeah. It's kind of that. It's certainly when a player is not available, certainly like LaMelo was last year with the injuries, and Halliburton plays at a really high level, and then he has a really good summer. It's like, I don't want to equate it to what we saw back in, I think, 2018 when we didn't see like Kawhi for like 2 years, right? And then he goes to Toronto, we're like, man, this guy's good. It's like, yeah. So I think if LaMelo plays and he's available and he plays 65, 70 games, I think he can get back to that, how we once talked about him.
So their starting 5, I would guess, will be Halliburton, Mathurin, and the Hield thing, whether they trade him or not, I think clarifies that Mathurin's just going to start, and we're going to roll with our lottery pick from last year, who was a Rookie of the Year candidate until kind of petered out a bit. Bruce Brown, Obi Toppin, Miles Turner. It's a fun starting 5. At the 1 and the 5, you have very good shooters for their positions, which allows the other 3 guys to slash and roll and dunk and do the stuff and cut and do the stuff that they do. The shooting between Mathurin and Toppin from long range, if one of those guys has an uptick and becomes a serious 3-point shooter, and I still have faith in Obi Toppin to do that. I mean, serious, I don't know, but make enough wide open catch and shoot threes. That lineup becomes real interesting because it's going to be fast as hell and fun to watch. Off the bench, TJ McConnell's a great backup point guard. Andrew Nebhard, I mean, you talk to people there, even though I'm penciling him in off the bench, you talk to people there, I mean, they talk about this guy like it's going to be hard not to play him 30 minutes a game as a combo guard who can do a lot of stuff. Big, strong, bigger than you think, stronger than you think. That's 2. Backup 4 and 5, I think there's going to be a competition between a whole bunch of players. We just mentioned them. Jarris Walker, they drafted. Jordan Nwora, they're high on. Backup 5, Tice, I feel like is the safer choice. Jackson is the more exciting choice. Jalen Smith will factor into there somewhere. Backup wing, the backup wing spot. I mean, maybe that's still Buddy Hield. I don't know. Like I feel like it's both an interesting and deep team and a team that I'm trying to check my excitement on because it's still young and unproven. Like I want to pencil them in as like a really hammer the over at 38.5. This could be a 45-win team. Like all goes right, they could push for the 6th seed and like definitely get into the play-in. I'm trying to check my excitement a little bit because I feel like that's a little exuberant, but it's an interesting team that owns all its picks. And I just think they're worth watching based on how Halliburton develops and how this all fits.
I think them and Orlando for me, those are the 2 teams, the the lottery teams that weren't in the play-in last year. Indiana for me, and I wrote about when this article comes out, kind of what to watch, and certainly there's the Hield factor we talked about. Mathurin is going to be, he's kind of a little bit the X factor for me, just because of he had such a really good first half of the year, and then he dipped, and I mean, our great Matt Williams pulled some stuff for me. 32%, 32.7 on jump shots, ranked in the bottom 10 of 135 players. 28-6 after February 1st.
Yeah,
Summer League, 35% from the field, 27% on threes. So he's, I mean, he's an X factor for me. But there are a lot of good things that he can do here. But I'm interested to kind of see where he's at. And you get the addition of Bruce Brown to this group. Ben Shepherd, who was their first round pick, is a nice young guard.
I forgot to mention him. Maybe he gets in the mix for some of those backup wing minutes.
It's a deep team. We don't have the Turner rumors hanging over like we did last year here. And I think once you get a little more clarity with Hield, you've got a nice mix of young players and certainly some of these veterans.
Mathurin, the stat that I would look at almost as much as the jump shooting is in 78 games and over 2,000 minutes. So he played a ton. 116 assists, 152 turnovers.
Yeah.
I just think the tunnel vision has got to improve for him, and that's fine. He's a rookie, and he is an absolute bulldozer going to the rim who wants to dunk on everybody and inflict pain, which I like. I just want to see a little bit more unselfishness and feel. Miles Turner, through all the trade rumors, all the extension talks that resulted in a deal, all of it, I'm glad he's still on the team. He's only 27 years old, and he's good. Now, is he going to develop into the sort of in-space playmaker you would really love from a guy in the short roll and handoffs and all that stuff? That's the weak point of his game. This dude is as good of a rim protector as there is in the NBA and is a legit three-point shooter. Like, I know everybody wants more dribbling and skill and like all that from their pick and pop fives now. He's still a damn good player who opens the floor for all those other guys, who's a good pick and roll partner, pick and pop partner for Halliburton, allows Toppin to be a good pick and roll partner for Halliburton. I'm just like we've all been guilty of jettisoning him to all these other teams who need centers, and New Orleans was the sexy place for. I'm glad he's on the Pacers. He's good, and he's not like old, and they extended him on a good deal. He's a good player.
He's on a damn good contract. I mean, 2 years, $40 million. I think he's the 10th highest paid center in the NBA here. But yeah, I am, and I got a good coach in Rick Carlisle. You add that to that, and I think with Kevin Pritchard, he's never really wanted to kind of never embrace like a full rebuild. It's like, we want to be competitive. Okay, let's see where we are at the trade deadline, right? Maybe we have to take a little bit of a step back, and maybe we can add a little bit here. But I think where the East is shaking up, I don't think there's no reason why we're not talking about them for play in, back end, 6 seed, somewhere there.
If they're not in the top 10, I'll be disappointed. And that's not as easy as it sounds when you've got like, we all the strong teams at the top that are still, depending on how things settle in the Dame and Harden situations, which are volatile. But Milwaukee, Boston, Philly, Cleveland, Knicks, Heat are all still good. Atlanta, I'm bullish on. Toronto, we'll see what they do. Chicago is like just Chicagoing around, still trying to bulls their way into a decent team. Orlando was 500 over the last 50-ish games of the season. Charlotte was 27-55 last year. They're healthy now, and Steve Clifford is going to ring all the wins you can get. Like it sounds like it should be easy to make the top 10 in the East. It's not going to be that easy, but I will be disappointed if the Pacers don't make it. This is an exciting team. You just hope they find somehow, by hook or by crook, the other all-star level player that they're going to need to be a true great team in 2 or 3 years around Halliburton. And look, this is a team that, as you said, has rarely bottomed out, found a way without a pick above number 10 to turn into what became the biggest threat in the East to the Heatles. They just seem to find ways, and I hope they find a way to build that kind of team. And it's an exciting project, and I think people shouldn't sleep on the Pacers. They're going to be fun to watch this year, and they're solid across the board.
No, I totally agree with that.
I'm glad Buddy Hield gave me an excuse to really think more deeply about this team. I like this team. Bobby Marks, go to work. I will see you soon. Enjoy Florida. And let's go Mets. # let's go Mets.
Oh boy, it's
another losing season for the Metropolitans.
Coming to an end soon. Thank you.
Well, at least you have the Jets.
Oh yeah, that's even better. That's even.
Do you have any sports teams who are good? Do you have a hockey team?
No, I don't.
Get a hockey team. Just pick a great hockey. Become a Golden Knights fan or something. We're going to all be going to Vegas all the time for the NBA.
But before we end this, I did give my 14-year-old the lesson last year of what becoming a Jet fan means. And what it means is that there's going to be a lot of misery and heartache. And I gave him the out. I said, pick the 49ers. Pick another team. And he said, no doubt I'm going to stick with them. And I said, okay, that's fine. But this is what you're going to deal with.
At some point in his life, and God's willing yours, the Jets will win. And it will be all the more sweeter that he did not cherry pick, whoever for no reason, a great team as a youth. At some point they will win. And when they win, it will mean more. That's what I've always told myself, but that's the nature of sports fandom, right? That's what we all do it for.
That's the nature of sports.
Bobby Marks, thank you, sir.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, let's bring in friend of the podcast, recently spurned by the Hoop Collective in what is being billed as an internal scandal, wearing a hat that I need to get the next time I come down to Texas, Rollertown Beer Works, to talk about a couple teams we haven't talked about in a bit as preview season comes fast and furious. Media days are just a couple of weeks away. Preseason basketball will be here before we know it. We're going to talk about a couple Tim MacMahon specials today with Tim MacMahon. How are you?
Howdy, partner. I am doing just fine. Of course, you know Roller Town Beer Works from their famous beer, the Big German, a Kolsch with minimal hops and a smooth finish. And yes, that is named after Dirk. It's actually, if you want to grab one, you can get it at that. You know, Dirk's got a restaurant at DFW Airport now.
He does?
Oh yes, oh yes. It's Gate C, 30 some odd. But yeah, they've got them there. They can go grab you one right there. Dirk wearing this exact hat on the little sign outside, as a matter of fact.
First of all, I do have to say, this is a family podcast. It's a wholesome podcast, and alcohol-related paraphernalia. I'm a little disappointed in you, Tim. You know that I don't tolerate that. I am a teetotaler, whatever that thing is. I am not that.
I've got a bar tab from Denver that says differently.
Oh God, you do. That's right. And by the way, I just want to make sure you're telling the truth. The Big German is a real beer, and I hope
absolutely.
people got the joke. Minimal hops and smooth finish. That's just you gotta like that.
Yeah, and Dirk is very clearly in on the joke. Yes, but then it's tasty. A few in my day.
I will have to have some when I come down. Keep it away from Luka. We'll talk about the Mavs in a few minutes. Let's go unconventional and start with the Utah Jazz, a team that is near and dear to your heart, a team that I have not talked too much about this offseason. And, you know, why not? The Jazz deserve a little love. They exceeded expectations last year. By the way, I should start by saying I have rarely been as wildly incorrect about a team and a player as I was about the 2023 Utah Jazz, who I described in my League Pass rankings, in which they finished 30th. And let me tell you this, the entire Utah Jazz front office is still giving me about putting the Utah Jazz 30th in the League Pass rankings. I described as less a basketball team and more a way station or a waiting area at an airport for everyone to get on different flights to other places. And lo and behold, I underestimated the collective malleability, adaptability, IQ of the players and Will Hardy, the coach. They all came together, found a way to maximize skill sets that would not necessarily have appeared to mesh all that well, and turned into a damn good team that won 37 games. And that includes kind of sputtering / letting go of the rope a little bit down the stretch. This could have very well been a 500 team. And the player I was wrong about, and I've copped to it before, I sold all my Lauri Markkanen stock. I sold it all. I had a lot. He was in my most intriguing players column years ago. He and Wendell Carter Jr. Just didn't seem like it was going to happen. And I mean, did he win most improved player or did Shea?
I must admit, I'm not quite sure, but he had a hell of a year. I mean, he was a legitimate all-star. You know, he was an efficient 25-point scorer. He scored in a lot of different ways. I am glad you brought up the League Pass rankings because it is still a sore subject there in Salt Lake City. I reached out to some folks yesterday, and one of my friends in the Jazz organization, in the upper regions of the Jazz organization, I said, "Hey, I'm going on Low Post tomorrow. Want to talk to you about some of your guys." The first text back is, "Oh, good. I'm sure Zach will have us ranked last in his League Pass rankings again." So still a bit of a sore subject there. But no, look, you were wrong about Lauri Markkanen. Cool. You know who's wrongest was the Chicago Bulls. It's not like you were just out in the wilderness on this. And you know, the Cavaliers, like, it worked out great for them because they were able to use Markkanen in a trade to get a guy who we'll see what the future holds for Donovan Mitchell and the Cleveland Cavaliers, but at least a shot at a perennial all-star player there. But Markkanen, and it started really when he went to play for Finland in Eurobasket, and you saw him doing all these things. Like, dude, you know, because you kind of got to the point where you started thinking of him as like a 7-foot spot up shooter, right? Like a 7-foot floor spacer. And you saw, wow, man, this guy's like grabbing rebounds and pushing on the break and finishing. Like, man, he's scoring off the dribble. He's doing all kinds of things. And Will Hardy's thing when not just with marketing, but with everybody on his team is more like, let's not assume they can't do these things. Let's see what all they can do. And especially with marketing, it was just like, let's just keep on keep on feeding this guy and see how much he can eat. And the answer was a whole lot. And so, the question with marketing now is, where on a pecking order of a potential contender would he be? Can he be the second best player on a contender? Is he a really good number 3? Obviously they'd have to get 1 and potentially 2, and that's a down the road thing. But there's no doubt that Markkanen's a guy that they can build around for a while.
Yeah, I find those questions, where does he slide in on the theoretical contender, to be so context based. Like, I think depending on who number 1 and number 3 and number 4 are, there are teams where he could be the second best player on a great team. I think there are probably more teams in which you would be number 3. But look, I mean, I can't remember a player who leapt from, in one season, I sold my stock, to, is he going to make the All-NBA team? Like, is he my last cut for the All-NBA team? I mean, that is as big of a leap basically as you can take mid-career. He's 26 years old. He's not young anymore. He's not old by any means. He's right in the fat middle of his prime. And as you said, the down the road questions are down the road. You mentioned Donovan Mitchell, who Brian Windhorst and others have said is unlikely to extend with the Cleveland Cavaliers at first opportunity, or at next opportunity even. I mean, we'll see. The coolest thing about what's happening in Utah is, I mean, they own so many picks from teams where you could reasonably see. I mean, Cleveland, even if Mitchell leaves, should be kind of insulated from any devastating downside with Garland and Mobley. Minnesota has Ant, so you would think they should be insulated from devastating downside. They have a Lakers pick as well that's top 4 protected in one season. The cool thing about having all of those picks is you don't have to worry so much about tanking on your own to get the the theoretical number 1 option. You can try to do what they did last season, which is, hey, let's get these guys in some games that matter, see what they can do, get them some experience, and maybe we can have the best of both worlds someday. By the way, just as an aside, this must have happened while I was away. Why did I come back from vacation and everyone on NBA Twitter was angry that people were trying to think about Anthony Edwards getting out of Minnesota at some point? What did I miss on this? It felt like everybody was angry about something that didn't happen, or I just must have missed it. What happened?
I think what you missed was he played in the World Cup. He was kind of the most prominent player on Team USA.
I saw that. That.
So that sparked conversation. Somebody said it. Some former players. I don't remember.
Minneapolis is a cool town. Minneapolis is a cool town. It's cold and cool. Go be KG 2.0 and let it ride as long as you can. Why not?
That's a down the road conversation. There's pressure to build around him because he's that type of a player. It's a down the road conversation. We're at least 2, probably 3 years away from that potentially being a talk.
And so back to the Jazz. Feel good season, have all these picks. And yet you look ahead and you're like, I mean, they not only do they not know who the quote guy is going to be, unless Markkanen makes another leap, which I kind of don't see coming, but maybe, who knows?
He was most improved last year, by the way.
He was, I know. I just looked it up, and our producer Dan reminded me something that did not happen that long ago, and both of us should frankly be able to remember that, and did not. Their ball handling future is so uncertain that I mean, we'll see what Keontae George can give them as a rookie. They really like him. They have some other Ochai Agbaji is going to be more of a wing, I think, than a semi-primary ball handler. We'll talk about him. But that's the big question going forward, is you have to look around the league today and think, if we don't get that guy in the draft somehow, and maybe they will, we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
2, 3, 4 years down the road is going to be available, safely under contract, because this is still Utah, and we can put this bushel of picks in play for. That might be a conversation for another day. Let's go back to this team.
Yeah,
Unless you want to say something.
Yeah, let's talk about their ball handling present, right? Because it's murky. It's murky. There are some candidates there. But I think that's the biggest question about this year's team and big picture down the road. It's 1, star power, 2, that guy. And they really like Keontae George. They had 3 first-round picks. He was the only one available for Summer League because of health issues. They feel, though, he is the most ready. He looks the best of that rookie class. He was impressive in the Summer League. The comps, a very common comp for him coming out is a guy who's on the roster who just signed a contract extension. It's Jordan Clarkson, which is that, he's a starting 2 guard now. Obviously he's been a 6-man most of his career, but basically an instant offense, smaller 2 guard type, but they want to find out if Keontae George can be a lead guard. Will Hardy would love for Keontae George to develop into, and he uses the term lead guard. He doesn't say point guard because, what's a point guard in today's NBA?
Guy who has the ball and runs pick and rolls a lot.
Right.
That's what we're talking about.
Right. And not in the John Stockton style, right? Like the old table setter. You look around the league, you talk about the best point guards in the league. They're averaging 25, 28, 30 points per game. And the goal is to find out, hey, can Keontae George be the kind of player who he's your primary offensive initiator? Taylor Horton Tucker showed some things towards the end of last season. They feel like he's had a really good summer, physically looks good going into a contract year. Maybe he can be part of the future. Maybe that contract is something that could be part of a trade to be determined. I'll say this. It wouldn't shock me at all if Chris Dunn starts a point guard for him. He's a guy who he was out of the league. He was in the G League. He'd barely played in the NBA for like 3 years or so since he kind of went bust with the Bulls, but they signed him to, I think it was a couple of 10 days in the rest of the season last year. And he played well for him. And, he can guard. The question is, is he going to kill you offensively? He was solid for him last year. And again, they feel, like I said, they feel good about him. I would not be surprised at all if he ends up starting at point guard or at least playing a lot of minutes for that team this season.
Saying Chris Dunn can guard, and I know you don't mean to do this, is underselling him. I believe it was the pandemic interrupted season 1920. I thought he was the best defensive guard in the NBA. It's borderline uncomfortable watching him with his giant arms and just super strong body, just harass people, bully people, envelope these little guards, get in the passing lanes. He's phenomenal. I agree with you. He's going to be in the mix of what is a very crowded backcourt. Look, if you ask me like what their starting 5 is, I only know 3 spots for sure, and they're the 3 front court spots: Markkanen, Collins, Kessler. John Collins is on the Utah Jazz, by the way. A lot of people probably forgot about that. John Collins, former Atlanta Hawk, that same guy, same dude, now plays for the Utah Jazz. They traded essentially nothing to get him. Yeah. I actually like him in this group, although he's going to in the starting 5, he's going to face the same problem of they have a big guy who rolls to the rim, just as that was Clint Capella's job in Atlanta. So what is John Collins going to do? But Will Hardy solved a lot of these problems last year, figured out what all these guys could do, what's a skill that you can lean into, even if the fit doesn't appear optimal. And then in backup lineups, either with Kelly Olynyk or just as the only true big guy on the floor, he can get into that roller mode. But let's just zoom out beyond the rotation. This team won 37 games last year, 9th in offense. And again, that's despite sliding down the rankings toward the end. This was a top 5 offense for a lot of the season, which is like incredible when you think about it. Yeah. 23rd in defense, which tracks 37 and 45. Their over under for this season is 35.5. So Vegas across the board is projecting them to win fewer games despite having won 37 last year and bringing back everybody. I ask you, Tim MacMahon, why do you think that is? And do you think it is accurate / fair?
I don't think it's anything necessarily related just directly to the Jazz roster. I mean, the West, I think, is stronger than it was a year ago. But look, they won 37 games last year, and they tanked blatantly down the stretch. I mean, to the point where when I was quizzing folks in the league office about, hey, like, if you're going to do anything about this Mavs tankapalooza in the last week of the regular season, they're like, somebody actually said to me, how come you haven't asked us about the Jazz? And my reply was, I don't remember Ryan Smith getting fined $600,000 for talking about tanking a couple of years ago. But they they tanked down the stretch last season. They were basically a 500 team. They were 35-36, and then they went into tank mode. So I would take the over on that. You know, I guess one thing you could say is a lot of the reason they were a 500 team was the work that they did when Mike Conley was on the roster. Obviously, he was traded just before the trade deadline in a trade that really didn't bring them anything immediately. That is the trade where, and it wasn't just Conley. It was Conley. It was
Vando.
It was Vanderbilt. I'm leaving somebody else out of that. But they were more competitive than anticipated for the first half of the season. But Danny Ainge and Justin Zanuck and Ryan Smith didn't. They weren't like, hey, let's see how good this team can be, because the answer probably was maybe a play-in team. And so obviously kept their eye on the bigger picture there, and were aggressively exploring trades, and then ended up settling on the deal where they got that Lakers top 4 protected pick. I believe it's a 27. So that's something that would make sense Vegas wise, is when you're looking at their record. As much as you want to say they tanked down the stretch of the season, it's a lot of those wins were with guys who were in Minnesota or the Lakers rotation now.
I think it's a fair line. I might actually take the under. And again, it's just that the Jazz kind of stayed the same. I guess they traded for John Collins. They didn't even say the same. They drafted all these guys, at least a couple of whom are going to get cracks in the rotation. The Hendricks kid, they got at 9. He wasn't healthy for Summer League. We'll see if he plays. Certainly George is going to get minutes off the bench, I think. So they're not the same. But the West is better, top to bottom. Everybody's trying to win. Even the Spurs have Wembanyama. We'll see how aggressively they try to win, but they have some talent. I do think this could be one of those have your cake and eat it too seasons where you're competitive, you're playing hard, you end up 32-50, and you have a top 5-6 pick in the draft. I mean, or better. You get a little, like they could kind of do both at the same time with this group, because I do think the West beefed up around them. There are no easy outs anymore, and they're not catching anybody by surprise. And they have some uncertainties, particularly in the backcourt, that they've got to figure out. Yeah,
and I do think you mentioned 3 guys in the starting lineup. I'd be very, very surprised if Jordan Clarkson doesn't start. Me
too.
Really played well as a starter last year. Is the veteran leader on that team. Is a beloved, culture guy throughout the organization. I don't know that they discussed specifics about his role when he signed that contract extension, but signed a contract extension that I think is relatively team friendly.
I refreshed my memory looking at the number today. It was 2 years, 28, 14 apiece. I'm actually kind of surprised he signed that. Like, that's a good deal for the Jazz. Maybe he just looks at the cap landscape and says, you know what? No one has cap room. The CBA is scaring people.
Yeah.
I'll take $28 million. That's fine.
Yeah. But again, I do think he'll be in the starting lineup. But you mentioned, like, have your cake and eat it too. The worst case scenario for the Jazz is they are a play-in team that gets bounced or just misses the play-in. And, well, boy, there's the 11th overall pick. There's a 12th overall pick because that's not their pick. Their pick is top 10 protected, owed to Oklahoma City for the Derek Favors salary dump. So, I know there's new rules in place, but if you get down to the stretch of the season and you're in that territory, there might be some tender hamstrings or things along those lines.
I agree with you. Clarkson's going to start. I think he might actually start at point guard, and I'm rooting for him to start at point guard because if I'm Utah, I'm throwing Agbaji into the deep water right away. I want him starting at the 2. I want to see what he can do as a starter. I want to see what he can do surrounded by our best players. I want to see how he defends and what he does against the other team's best players. So if it's me and I'm Will Hardy, I'm going Clarkson, Agbaji, Markkanen, Collins, Kessler. And off the bench, I don't know what the hell I'm doing except probably Sexton's got to play. Colin Sexton also still on the team. Probably George has to play. You always have one of Olynyk and Collins backing up Walker Kessler. They don't really have a true backup center, I think, that's going to get minutes. And then it's just kind of like, are you going to play THT? Are you going to play Fontecchio? Fontecchio was pretty good in Eurobasket, had some moments last year, kind of a tweener forward. Are you going to play Hendricks? I mean, there's other guys we could. Does Dunn get minutes? I don't know what happens off the bench, but I like that starting 5. You think Agbaji starts or no? I think it's totally up in the air from what I've heard.
Yeah, I do think it's up in the air. And just mentioning Colin Sexton, like, could he start? Possibly, I guess, but I do know that they consider him long term to be that 6-man type of guy. I would expect them to want to keep him in that role. A guy who he kind of compares to, it just happens to be on the Jazz's coaching staff, and that's Jason Terry, who obviously was a starter for a long time in the NBA, but had his best years as a 6th man, including on the 2011 NBA championship team in Dallas. And so, an awfully good guy to be working with Sexton on a daily basis. But yeah, they've got a lot of people. And look, what the Jazz roster looks like now and what the Jazz's roster looks like after the trade deadline, it could be drastically different. And you just know, Danny Ainge is always, along with Justin Zanuck, those guys are always going to explore the opportunities. And their vision is not how good can we be this season. It's, how can we get really good as soon as possible? And so, they've got a ton of picks. And that doesn't mean they wouldn't stockpile more picks, because obviously if they're going to ever trade for a superstar, it's going to be a pick intensive package. But I would anticipate that the Jazz would be one of the more aggressive teams in the trade market again this season.
To go either way, because they have a lot of interesting players that could help contenders. I mentioned the backup 5 situation. Kelly Olynyk's on an expiring deal. He's extension eligible. I would be a little surprised if an extension got done there, just because that expiring deal could be in this new cap environment, could be an interesting trade chip. Kelly Olynyk's good. And they have like interesting wild cards on the roster. Like Yurtseven from Miami, I on a non-guaranteed deal. He is an incredible offensive rebounder with good touch. Like, that's worth the flyer. Samanic is still here. Romeo Langford is hanging around on a non-guaranteed deal for some reason. Who knows who could emerge? Couple of housekeeping notes. Trades, you just hinted at trades. Bobby and I just talked a little bit about Damian Lillard. I've never sensed any appetite for Utah to dive into those waters unless the price got so low as to be irresistible.
Yeah, not aggressively, but like as you said, it would have to be the sort of deal that Portland is turning its nose up.
And I made a couple brief inquiries about Buddy Hield, because I just thought, we're talking about the backcourt and the uncertainty about the backcourt, and do they have a pure shooter on the team? Maybe Agbaji kind of steps into a little bit of that role, but Buddy Hield is Buddy Hield, and I didn't sense a lot of interest.
Yeah, again, I think any trade they do is going to be more about 2 years from now than it is right now. And the thing with Hield, obviously expiring contract, and clearly he wants to get paid. Then you start talking about timeline, Markkanen in 26, the other guy who's a unquestioned foundation piece there, Walker Kessler, obviously going into his second season. Agbaji was the third guy who they told teams going lead up to the trade deadline was off limits in conversations. I don't know that it's premature to call him a foundation piece, but it's that kind of indicates to you their optimism about him.
I liked what I saw from him in limited minutes last year, particularly at the end of the year. Another part of the Donovan Mitchell trade, by the way. They got everything you can get in that trade. And like we skirted over Collins.
Mm-hmm.
I still think John Collins is good. He's got his flaws as a player. Makes mistakes here and there in terms of scheme. He's really, really skilled. The shot has gone wildly up and down. I wouldn't just skirt over that. I understand his place in the starting five is a little strange. This team is very big. Like Lauri is a kind of a 3 again, like he was in Cleveland, like he was last year. I am excited to see what Will Hardy has in store for John Collins, because he's a good player who kind of fell off the map a little bit last year in Atlanta, and either he's going to be good in Utah, or they should want to rehabilitate his reputation as a player, not as a person. He's a fine guy, great guy. I like John Collins a lot as a trade asset. And it was a great, to get him for nothing is a great piece of business for them.
Yeah, and I would say be patient in judging the John Collins fit with the Jazz, because it's probably going to take some time, right? Both him kind of learning how to play in their system the way that they want to play after playing in Atlanta, where obviously the ball was going to be in the hands of Trae Young the vast majority of the time. Also, he is accustomed to playing with a non-shooting big man, but there's going to be some fit issues there. There's going to be some things that John Collins has to figure out. More so, I think that Will Hardy's going to have to figure out. As you mentioned, just from a quick fit standpoint, it's probably going to be easier for him offensively when he's on the floor with Kelly Olynyk, who can shoot the ball, who can, kind of serve as a facilitator. Olynyk can space the floor if Collins is the role guy in pick and rolls. Now, if you ask Walker Kessler, he could tell you, "Hey, give me a chance. Let me get some corner threes."
I was gonna say Walker Kessler kind of disappointed for Team USA. He's gonna be a stud in the NBA. Don't let that performance fool you. The guy didn't get a ton of minutes. He's going to be really good. And Olynyk, you know what I said before? I'd be surprised if he gets an extension. I would be surprised, but Danny Ainge has always had a soft spot for him. If you can get him on a team friendly deal, similar to the Clarkson deal, something like it's not the craziest idea. Why not? It wouldn't shock me. I would bet against it, but it wouldn't shock me.
I'd be surprised if he got one before the trade deadline.
Fair enough.
Just because that takes him out of conversations, and if the Jazz are going to be talking to teams because of the expiring contract and because he's a guy who can help contenders, I think Olynyk would be one of the guys who other teams are asking. I know a lot. They were asked about him a lot last year as well, and nothing ended up happening. But I would think you'd want to keep your options open there.
Plug and play. All right, let's move to your hometown team, the Dallas Mavericks, that we have not talked a lot about since just the initial reaction to what was a very active offseason for them. Omax Prosper in the draft, Derek Lively in the draft, Seth Curry, Dante Exum, Rashawn Holmes in a salary dump, Derek Jones Jr., Grant Williams sign and trade, probably the headliner, home run fit to me. If I'm plotting out their starting lineup, it's the two big stars who are back together, Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic. The Mavs were 5-11 with the two of them in the lineup. Not going to go crazy about that. With both of them on the floor, they were plus 49 in 444 minutes. That's quite good. Their offense was predictably out of this world. Defense, so-so. So those two.
Wow, that is a very pleasant way to put it.
Well, their defense with them on the court, 115 points allowed per 100 possessions, is just plain bad. It's not like astronomically bad. It's just plain bad. They did achieve that number with opponents shooting horribly from 3-point range. So perhaps it was a little qualitatively actually worse than that. But that will be obviously, that's the big question for this team. They're going to have a great offense with these two guys. Defensively, we'll see. Those two, Josh Green, Grant Williams, and Dwight Powell, who I affectionately referred to as an NBA cockroach last week on the podcast, just cannot kill Dwight Powell as the starting center. I think they'll open competition for that spot.
Yeah.
Off the bench, you're probably going to stagger Kyrie and Luka so they get to cook individually. That makes a lot of sense. Tim Hardaway Jr. Kleba is going to be in there. I think they might pencil Kleba in as a backup 4 to start the season, who slides to 5. Some just to give Rashawn Holmes a chance or to give Lively a chance. And then you got this sort of brigade of wings, the Currys, the Exums, the Hardys, the Prospers. I would imagine
Jones
playing with Seth Curry with Kyrie Irving. That's probably too small. Maybe you just set it up so Seth Curry plays when Luka is the stagger guy. And Derek Jones Jr. provides a lot of interesting flexibility. You could play him at the 4 with either Grant Williams or Maxi Kleba at the 5 and have him be the rim runner for Luka. We know Luka loves lob catchers, rim runners. This team, I don't know how the hell to project them in the West, which is absolutely loaded. This is a team where the fit, this is going to sound crazy considering who their 2 best players are. The fit is greater than the talent, particularly below the first 2 guys. I mean, the first guy is by himself capable of turning you into a 50-win team. That's why I kind of don't know how to project them, because below Luka, who again by himself is a potential 50-win team, but by himself with shooting and defense. I was
going to say it didn't happen last year.
With fit that makes sense, and I think they have fit that makes sense. He alone is good enough to get them to that level if he's healthy and in shape, and he looked in shape in Eurobasket.
And playing both ends of the floor.
And well, we'll see about that.
Which is related to being in shape, but yes.
And then and Kyrie, and then the drop off from there. Like all the other players are like decent. All the other players have been backups here and there, or for most of their career. So but they all fit, and that's what I mean by fit greater than talent. I think their over under is like 44.5. I would take the over just on star talent, but I don't know how to fit this team in the Western Conference hierarchy, and I'm wondering if you can maybe help me.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously last year was an immense disappointment to go from being a Western Conference Finals team to being a not even a play-in team, and yeah, they tanked down the stretch of the season, but they tanked because they weren't going to be a play-in team anyway, right? It wasn't in their favor. They had a top 10 protected pick that they decided they had to keep, which made sense. The problem wasn't that the tanking strategy. The problem was that the tanking strategy made sense for a team.
And by the skin of their teeth, they kept it. Then they traded down, got off Bertans, and got the guy they actually wanted in Lively. That was a great trade. And then they picked up the Prosper pick in the Holmes salary dump. They had a great summer. Like, I think Grant Williams is just a perfect fit on a great contract.
I agree with that. They gave up a hefty price to get Grant Williams, though.
That pick, you're talking about the pick swap and Reggie Bullock.
I'm talking about that. Listen, that is a huge risk. It's a 2030 pick swap with San Antonio. And listen, this is a team that is all in on trying to build a contender around Luka, as you have to be when you have that kind of a talent and, understanding the way that things work in the modern NBA. If this doesn't work out, though, woof, because you've given up your 2029 first rounder unprotected to get Kyrie, which, this is all related. And now you're 2030. It's an unprotected swap with San Antonio, which you assume San Antonio with Victor in year, what would that be, 7 or whatever, is going to be good. There's a massive risk there. And they gave up, they moved Bullock in that deal. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Bullock is, an all-star or anything like that. I think Grant Williams is certainly an upgrade. I will say this, though. I don't know who's guarding all these really good point guards that you're going to run up against, because that was Bullock before. Grant Williams is a outstanding defensive player, a versatile defensive player. You don't want him.
Yeah, I can't use his size there. That's not.
Well, also you don't
guard up and down, but
the small, quick guards give him trouble, even in switches, but certainly as a primary assignment. I don't know. I don't know who's guarding those guys. And the Mavericks will score. They scored last year with Luka and Kyrie. They were lighting it up offensively. There was some stuff down the stretch, crunch time, where they didn't figure it out, whatever. They will put points up on the board, and a lot of them. But, Luka said himself last year, we can't stop anybody. Is that going to change? They tried. That's why you went out and got Grant Williams. That's why, you target a guy like Max Prosper in the draft. Lively, I think, will play some this year. I just ran into somebody the other day with the Mavs who says, I'm more optimistic about him now than I was even in summer league. But the thought there is, hey, he might really be an impact contributor later in the season. He is more of a project. Derek Jones Jr., I think, can help them defensively. But again, I don't know who's guarding, the Steph Currys and the John Morant's once he's back, and go down the Western Conference. You can run into a really good guard on the vast majority of teams that you might see Jamal Murray come playoff time. And so will there be defense? And then the other thing you got to ask is, will there be drama? You need much better defense and no drama. Well, you got to minimize the drama and maximize the defense for this team to have a chance to do anything that would remotely ease the pressure in the big picture.
Yeah, I think 10, 12 years ago, if you studied championship teams, finals level teams, then an elite defense was slightly more important to a championship level team than an elite offense. You needed to be good at both. But if you parse the data, I remember doing this in 2010, elite defense is a little more important. That's flipped now in this era of you can't touch anybody on the perimeter. Everybody shoots threes, pace, small ball, skill ball. Elite offense has probably surpassed elite defense as the most important building block of a championship team. That doesn't mean you can win with the defense and just outscore everybody on the way to a title. You still need a competent defense. And I don't care what teams you look at, whether it's last year's Nuggets team, an incredible offensive machine built around probably the best offensive player in the world, had a top 12-ish defense in the regular season. That was a little better than that when they tried. The Cleveland Cavaliers, who did not win the title in 2017, one of the greatest offensive teams ever seen, they were like a 13th, 14th best defense in the league, better than that when they tried. You still need to be decent. If the Mavs can be 4th in offense and 12th in defense, 16th in defense is probably around there is probably where it gets iffy. They got a shot to do some damage. You mentioned Olmax. Those backup wing minutes are going to be really interesting because Exum shot the hell out of it internationally, figured that part of his game out. Jaden Hardy, I think, has got to play. He showed enough last year off the dribble, shooting threes, which has been up and down for him across his all other levels of basketball he's played. And he's got a 6'9" wingspan. To answer your question about who's guarding point guards, maybe it's Josh Green to start games if he indeed wins that starting spot. And I hate to say this, I hate to burden him with this responsibility. Sometimes it's going to just have to be Kyrie Irving. You're going to have to defend your opposite number sometimes. That's just the way it is. He's a capable defender. He's big. He's tough. He can get around screens. Like when he buys in, he's a capable defender. And like sometimes the answer is just going to be him. And if you want to win, like that's just going to have to be the case some nights.
Yeah, and you mentioned Dante Exum. I think he can be part of that solution. You know, he's a guy, he's always been able to defend in the NBA. He couldn't shoot before, and he couldn't stay healthy. That's why he ended up out of the NBA. You know, if he stays healthy, at least in Europe, he shot the ball really well. You know, he shot it at 42% last year in the EuroLeague. So, you know, that's another one. I think they did really well in the minimum market. You know, with him and Derek Jones, like they wanted to get better defensively and more athletic. Those two guys to me are really nice minimum type of signings. But, you know, like the maximum guys got to buy in on the defensive end. But, you know, as you just said, with Kyrie and with Luka. And look, there's a lot of factors in this, but a primary reason that the Mavericks fell apart late last season is because Luka stunk on the defensive end. And a primary reason why the Mavericks really got it rolling the year before and, you know, made that Western Conference championship run. Yeah, it was because Jalen Brunson really had a bust out season, but it was because that team went from a bottom 10 defense to 7th in the league. And a lot of that was Luka buying in. They are going to build a defense in large part around minimizing Luka's responsibilities, protecting him. I always say one of his best defensive attributes is the ability to hide him on various different positions. When he is in shape, able to give effort on that end, willing to give effort on that end, he's obviously a very intelligent player. He has great hands. He is a very good rebounder, defense rebounder in particular. He's got all those things have to be rolling. He's got to be, as J Kidd likes to say, willing to participate defensively, because it didn't happen down the stretch last year. And that's how you go 5-11 with, you know, 2 max salary superstars on your roster.
And look, to be clear, you and I talked after the trade for Kyrie and said we wouldn't have done this trade. Like we just don't want to be in that business. Offensively, I think the Mavs are going to be vindicated for that trade. I think it's going to work offensively for them. To review, they gave that 2029 first to Brooklyn, which is unprotected. Dinwiddie, Finney-Smith. That was about the ceiling of what Kyrie Irving was going to draw as a trade target. Then it's a comp that's being used across the league right now for James Harden, another sort of troublesome, nettlesome situation. I don't think I've ever said the word nettlesome in my entire life until right now. That's an exciting moment when you think you say a word for the first time.
Especially a Dartmouth guy using a new word.
Yeah, that's a long time ago. I've gotten stupider and stupider as the years have gone on. And to put that 2022 conference finals run in perspective, it feels like ancient history. It's like not long ago at all.
Right.
They had a very good defense that year, as you point out. And it was one that was built on no magic talent bullet. It was scheme, execution, and attention to detail. It was not luck. Like there was not a lot of shooting luck involved in it. It was just a team that was kind of dialed in across the board, a team of unspectacular defenders. I mean, Finney-Smith's good, Bullock's good, but they're not spectacular. They didn't have a great rim protector or anything like that backing them up. They just executed their scheme really well almost every single time down the floor. They need to get back to that. And I write this stat down every time I talk about the Mavericks. You look at the minutes in that playoff minutes in 2022. It's still 2023. So not long since then, players who ranked first, second, third, and fifth in postseason minutes for that team are gone. Yep. Like the degree of turnover is astounding. And here we are with the team that I do think is good. I just, like, if you asked me what is a successful season, what is like a above expectations outcome for the Mavericks. What maybe if you want to say ceiling, maybe that's what maybe ceiling is the right terminology. I don't know. It feels like second round to me is like a reasonable. I don't want to say, I don't like putting ceilings on. I don't like putting ceilings on people to MacMahon. People could develop and change, but that feels like a reasonable, like, oh, wow, we had a great season outcome. Beyond that feels a little iffy to me.
So I would say a successful season is a season in which Luka Doncic gets on the private jet to head home to Slovenia and says, you know what, this thing's heading in the right direction. I feel good about the direction of the franchise. I feel good about the pieces in place around me, and the way that they're going. Like whether I probably would require a second round thing, but like Derek Lively's probably not going to be a guy who just hits the ground running as a one and done NBA rookie, but
has the skill set you want.
Yes,
lob catcher, defense, but it's hard for rookies, man. It's just hard.
Yeah, but if he's a guy who, over the course of the season, and like this guy was just talking, who says, hey, by the end of the season, he's really given them good minutes, and because for this team to be a real threat, they've got to be better at the center position. Like, it's not Dwight Powell's fault that he's the Mavericks starting center, most likely. He gets beat up by fans. It's not his fault they haven't upgraded there. They've tried, and they've failed miserably to use your taxpayer mid-level on JaVale McGee and give him a 3-year deal and the promise of a starting job. And then the promise of the starting job lasts 2 weeks. And
I wanted to get through
the whole podcast after a year.
I look forward to when we can get through a whole Mavericks podcast, just for the sake of the sanity of Dallas fans, without using either of the J words, Jalen Brunson or JaVale McGee. Maybe in 2025, we can get through a whole Mavericks podcast without mentioning one or both of them.
Listen, it's not our fault that things have gone haywire, and
the Celtics have their J's, the Mavericks have their J's.
Hey, and you go back to the 3 J's back in the day. One of them's the head coach now.
Oh, wow.
Jackson, Jamal Mashburn. There's been some J's.
People need to Google, do some Googling on that. That was a interesting era on and off the floor for the Dallas Mavericks.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much of what you find on Google will be true. I'm still not sure, to be honest with you.
I hope it's all true.
But again, they've got to get better at the center position. The hope is that by drafting Derek Lively, developing him, Tyson Chandler's been working with him. They did hire Alex Jensen, who'd been with the Jazz for a long time, was the driving force behind Rudy Gobert's development. I think they've got good people in place to work with this guy. I've heard nothing but good things about him from obviously athletically, like he's a 7'1" athlete. I've heard nothing but good things from him about like a, character or work ethic, all those kind of things. He very well could be a significant piece of a really good team sooner than later, but it won't be right away.
That would be great if by the end of the season Derek Lively's playing 12 to 15 good minutes a night. You'd feel fantastic about that, I think. That's where I am with the Mavs. I think they're going to be an elite offense. I think Kyrie, one thing you said before, Luka's defensive rebounding. One of the things I liked about Kyrie on this team from the beginning was when Luka gets those rebounds, he's got a guy he can hit it ahead to. And this team just desperately needed someone to get their ass moving in transition, to get like just a couple possessions where you get easy shots early in the shot clock. It's not a goddamn slog every time. Kyrie's really good at that. And I don't want to belabor this because we talked about it before. The 2-man game between them is something they've got to lean further into than they did last year. I was actually surprised how rarely they used it. It felt like just such a natural extension of the kind of wing point guard pick and rolls that Luka likes to run to get size mismatches, and what Kyrie had with LeBron in Cleveland. I would imagine that was one of the projects talked about in the coaches' meetings in the offseason. You put those two things together, I just don't see any way this is not a very good offensive team.
Yeah, listen, I don't think anybody's worried about whether they'll score points. There's a lot of things to worry about. I think, as you mentioned, they were a damn good offense after the trade last year. They should be better than that. But that's not enough even to crack the play-in.
And I know Mavs fans don't want to hear about like a second round exit would be a quote ceiling or something like that for this team. That's just life in the West, man. Like there's going to be, you go across the board. I was out to dinner with someone last night in LA. We were listing all the decent to good, decent to very good to elite teams in the West. And we talked about how people do this exercise. Like they don't even mention Minnesota. Minnesota is like an afterthought. I think Minnesota is going to be good this year. Like they pushed Denver. They didn't push them. They lost 4-1, but without McDaniels, without Naz Reid, that's a good team that, because people focus on the sort of top teams and then the sexy wild card teams like Dallas or the Pelicans with Zion, like they're just, the West is absolutely loaded. The Thunder get a lot of buzz because they're young and exciting and blah, blah. Houston upgraded here and there. West is just loaded. Like second round exit for the Mavs, I think would be a great season. Anyway, MacMahon.
Hey, a second round play-in exit would be a massive upgrade from what we saw a year ago.
It would be. We're just gonna some years you got to throw into the dustbin of history, move on, pretend like they didn't happen. Don't say any of the J words and move on with life. Tim MacMahon, a regular on the Hoop Collective. I think a co-owner of the Hoop Collective. You need to get your image. You and Bontemps need to get your faces on the logo of the Hoop Collective. I feel bad asking either of you to come on this podcast because that's your show along with Brian now. You need to get your faces up there.
There's a bootleg cartoon drawing that has Bontemps very prominently on there. I'm also on there. Now it was done by Kiki Bontemps, the beautiful Mrs. Bontemps, an outstanding artist. That's my preferred logo, not this thing where it's windy. Actually, did you know that he is changing the pronunciation of his name? He's going to be Windhurst now. He's decided that he's really leaning into the German thing. So he's no longer windy. He's now Windy.
Globetrotting just across the world. He does have the best hair of the three of you, and arguably the best hair at the worldwide leader.
No, he was a lot cooler when he had a buzz cut. He's gone, he's got all, he's basically got an endorsement deal with his goop that he puts in his hair now. Vindy's gone Hollywood on us.
Windhorst. All right, Tim MacMahon, your coverage is awesome across the league. I'll see you soon, buddy, and keep that Denver bar tab between us, please, in the future, okay?
Appreciate it, brother, and adios amigos.